Okay, thank you so much, guys, for coming today. We're doing Endocrine System 2. So that's the final lecture for midterm 3. So on Thursday we revise, and the following week is the midterm 3 before Thanksgiving. So today we're going to talk about the lipid-soluble hormones. We're going to talk about the mode of action. We talked about how lipids are soluble. Lipid-soluble hormones, like the plasma membrane, because it's also a lipid. So they cross right through. They don't have to attach to a receptor on the membrane, right? And we talked about how you have two kinds of receptors. One is where, and the other is located where? What are the receptors for these lipid-soluble hormones? We said some of these receptors are located inside of the cell where? What's the inside of the cell called? Starts with a C. Cytoplasm, right? Is it too early? Okay, or it can attach to something in the nucleus or nuclear receptor, okay? So we'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about other glands, like the pituitary gland. We'll talk about the hypothalamus, which is very important in controlling some of these metabolic functions, and thyroid as well, all right? Okay, so here goes. So these are intracellular receptors, like I said. We got the cytoplasmic ones, or the nuclear receptors, because these steroids and all these lipid-soluble hormones can cross the membrane. So they go right through and attach to a cytoplasmic receptor. Today I'll show you mechanism of action of one that will attach to a cytoplasmic receptor, I think. Yeah, know that we have both. So the effect of lipid-soluble hormones is to cause or the synthesis of a protein, right? And then the effects of that protein will be the effects of that hormone, right? Okay, and we talked about it. A protein is a very long chain of amino acids, right? It's going to take some time to produce it. So there's a long lag phase. But once the protein is produced, even after the hormone secretion is stopped, as long as that protein is there, you continue to feel the effect. So the prolonged effect here for lipid-soluble hormones, okay? Prolonged effect. So, of course, you know all about protein synthesis, right? You've got to transcribe the message. So that means put the message on messenger RNA, all right? Okay, and then the message goes outside of the nucleus, and then it will attach to a free ribosome. And then you have translation of the code, and then you form a protein. And then functional protein is what is the effect of that hormone. Okay, so so it goes right into the cell and will attach to a certain part of the DNA called hormone response elements. I'll show you that. Hormone response element. This is DNA is got many genes, right, which are codes for different proteins. So whenever there's a starting of the code, normally we just call them HRE, hormone response element. So at the start of that gene, there will be that part sticking out of the DNA. So the hormone receptor complex will recognize that, and it will dock itself where that gene starts. And then it will transcribe that particular gene. So it's the way these steroids know, the hormone receptor complex knows how to attach to DNA so that it will cause the production of a specific protein. Okay? So we talked about how these are slow acting because you have to produce that protein and so on. Okay? And the intracellular receptors would be cytoplasmic. That is in the cytoplasm, or it is nuclear. That means the receptor is located in the nucleus, all right? Before it attaches to the hormone response element on the DNA. Okay? All right, so this is the mechanism of action for lipid-soluble hormones. All right? So a lipid-soluble hormone, because it's lipophilic, it will cross right through the membrane, because the membrane itself is lipid. All right? So therefore, when it is being transported in blood, it is bound to a protein, right? because blood is an aqueous environment, right? So you can't have lipids in there. Just like when you try to put oil on water, it won't mix, right? The oil will just hang on the top. So while it's being transported in blood, these lipid steroid hormones are bound to a protein, okay, to make them soluble in the aqueous environment in blood, right? Because it's all water. Okay, and then once it gets to the target cell, it will, be dissociated from that protein. Then it will just enter through the, the plasma membrane. Okay, and then it will have to attach to another protein. Okay, why is that? Well, since it's attached to a protein in blood, why would it need to attach to a protein again once it gets into the cell? It's still aqueous environment. The cytosol is all water, right? So it still has to attach to a protein, because otherwise it will mess up again. You see what I'm saying? It's still an aqueous environment, so it still has to attach to a protein. It's just that you can't get it through when it's attached to another big protein. It will become too cumbersome. Okay, so that's why it has to attach to an intracellular receptor again. Okay, so that's good. So the lipid soluble will cross, boom, 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 and then in this case, it's going straight to the nucleus, right? So it's going to attach to a nuclear receptor. Okay, and those pores there on the nucleus are made for that. Okay, so it goes straight through, but in other cases it could be located in here. Okay, maybe the ones that go to the nucleus straight away somehow polar lipids a little bit. They may have some sort of polarity on it, so they may deal with water a little bit more, But ones that may attach to a cytoplasmic receptor, those may be very lipid. You know what I'm saying? Non-polar, so it won't go through even the cytosol. You see what I'm saying? You see, it's making sense now. Why you have a, it just depends on the qualities of that hormone, how lipid it is. If it's very, very lipid and it's got nothing polar on it, it will probably attach to a cytoplasmic receptor. Okay. In the exam, if I was to ask, why would steroids have a cytoplasmic and a nuclear receptor? Can you kind of give me a reason? Would you be able to do that? You should do that. I know it's something, it's adding on a little bit, but I want you to start to think like that. You see what I'm saying? Because why would you need one cytoplasmic receptor, one nuclear receptor? Why can't you just have one kind of receptor for all of those steroids? You see what I'm saying? Not all of them are as, they deal with water the same. So the ones that don't deal with water very much, they have to attach to a protein immediately. So in the cytoplasm. Okay, guys? So think like that, because the body does these things because there's a good reason for it. It's never just because, So start to think like that. So once it gets in there, okay, this will attach to a nuclear receptor. This one is a nuclear receptor. So maybe this hormone kind of has some polarity to it. You know what I'm saying? So it will attach because DNA is a bunch of genes on it, right? So that hormone response element will be sticking out there for that particular gene. And the gene is just a sequence of DNA that codes for a protein. Okay? So the hormone response element will be sticking right there. And I'll show you a cartoon that shows that. And then it will know where to dock on the DNA so that it will cause the production of the correct protein. Okay? So that's the hormone response element, okay? So the cytoplasmic receptor is not shown on this one. Okay? Once it's attached to the nuclear receptor, and then it will seek that hormone response element, and then it will stick to that part. So whenever it sticks to a certain part with that hormone response element, it will only transcribe that gene. Okay? It's not going to transcribe the whole DNA. It will transcribe only that gene and then stop. Okay? Because you're producing one protein. Okay? And then once it does that, messenger RNA is produced, right? So this is the transcription part. Okay? To transcribe. It's like when you transcribe in code, you'll be copying what's being written. So the production of messenger RNA, you're copying what's written on the DNA. So it's transcription. right? And then it will exit the nucleus, right, through these pores, the messenger RNA, and then it will go to a free ribosome. Remember free ribosomes? We talked about it when we started talking about organelles and cells at the beginning, right? And we said that's where what occurs, protein synthesis occurs. So it will attach to a free ribosome, and then translation, that message will be translated into a protein, right? So number 5 would be in translation. Okay, you know that those processes from the biology. Okay, so that's that, and then the transcription. So if I was to ask about, the mechanism of action for steroid hormones, and if I specify that this one will attach to a cytoplasmic receptor, then you talk about that. You say that it will attach to a receptor in the cytoplasm. Okay. If I say, okay, give me the mechanism of action of a steroid receptor that of a lipid-soluble hormone that attaches to a nuclear receptor, then you talk about this. Okay. So I'll make
because only a nuclear receptor is going to go into the nucleus, right? The others are just going to stop right there.
Well, yeah, only to pick up the protein. They'll only stop in the cytoplasm to pick up the protein, but they still proceed to the nucleus. Because the nucleus is where the DNA is located, that's where you can do the transcription, right? See what I'm saying? And the reason why it picks up a protein here is because maybe that is very non-polar lipid. Okay? It won't be able to survive, even if the cytoplasm is a small environment, aqueous environment, it won't be able to survive that because it's just way too lipid, okay, for the water. Because all cells, everything, the body is liquid, it's all water. Every reaction occurs in aqueous environment. Okay, so those ones that are very, very lipid and can't deal with water, can't stand water, immediately as soon as they enter the cell, boom, they attach to a cytoplasmic receptor. But if it's somehow polar, because some of the lipids are polar, like the phospholipids on the bilayer, they got polar ends on the outside. So maybe those ones that can deal a little bit with water can go and attach to a receptor here in the nucleus. Okay. So I may ask for
cross over the cytoplasm by themselves.
Yeah, the crossover the cytoplasm unattached. Okay? Because they have a little bit of charge on them. They're a little bit polar lipids. Okay? I might just ask that one of the bonus questions and say, okay, why is it that you have a cytoplasmic receptor and a nuclear receptor? Okay? And that's because some lipids are very lipid. They can't deal with water at all. Even that short cytoplasm, it's not a very big environment. It will still need to be attached to a protein to survive. Okay? That's why. All right. So after it comes out, attaches to a ribosome, the messenger RNA, translation happens, and then we've got that protein, and then the effects of that protein will be the effects of that hormone. That protein is probably an enzyme that will catalyze a specific reaction. See what I'm saying? All enzymes are proteins. Okay, so good. So know this mechanism of action of lipid-soluble hormones. Okay, lipid-soluble hormone mechanism. You gotta know. Okay, so this is the cartoon that's going to talk about that, and it's going to talk about tetraiodothyronine, which we will talk about later, which is a thyroid hormone.
Steroid hormones are not water-soluble. They travel in the blood attached to protein carriers. When steroid hormones arrive at their target cells, they dissociate from their protein carriers and pass through the plasma membrane of the cell. Some steroid hormones bind to specific receptor proteins in the cytoplasm and then move as a hormone receptor complex into the nucleus. Other steroids travel directly into the nucleus before encountering their receptor proteins, not shown. The hormone receptor protein, activated by binding to the hormone, is now able to bind to specific regions of the DNA. These DNA regions are known as the hormone response elements. The binding of the hormone receptor complex has a direct effect on the level of transcription at that site. Messenger RNA, mRNA, is produced, which then codes for the synthesis of specific proteins.
right, so the effects of the protein will be the effects of the hormone, right? So this one showed cytoplasmic receptor. Okay.
So the coding takes place in the cytoplasm and not.
What's that?
The coding takes place in the cytoplasm and not in the
coding.
nucleus? Yeah, because that showed it. The messenger RNA came out, the free ribosome came and coded for the new protein. Like they needed. So what happens in the.
It wasn't coding for the new protein. You see, what remember when I was talking at the beginning, I said the hormone receptor complex goes into the nucleus, right, and it will attach it to the hormone response element, right? Then you transcribe. That's when you copy the code on the DNA.
So it takes the copy out of the nucleus to the.
Yeah, it takes the copy. The messenger RNA is simply a messenger that carries the genetic code for the sequence of amino acids in that particular protein. Okay? So the transcribing happens in the nucleus itself, where you produce the messenger RNA. Okay?
So then but the messenger RNA.
The messenger RNA comes out.
Okay.
It has to come out of the nucleus. Okay? Then that transcribed message is translated into a protein in the cytoplasm. Okay? Yeah. So did you get that now? Yeah. Thank you for that question. Because that's the clarity that you need. Because when you are telling me about the mechanism of action of the steroids, I want you to be talking about those things. I know it didn't say transcription over there, and it didn't say translation, but because you know about protein synthesis already, because right now we're assuming, because you did it in biology 1-1, whatever. So you talk about those things. Okay? All right, so there you go. So now the pituitary, we talked about it. It's one of those in the brain. One of those endocrine glands in the brain. Okay, and then it regulates about 9 hormones. The pituitary does that it produces. And we've got the anterior pituitary, which is towards the front, and we've got the posterior pituitary towards the back. The anterior pituitary is one that's called the adenohypophysis, is one that's controlled by hormones that are released from the hypothalamus. Okay, like growth hormone, releasing hormone from the hypothalamus. Okay, will cause the secretion of growth hormone by the pituitary, the anterior pituitary. Okay, the posterior pituitary is connected to the hypothalamus by the infundibulum, and therefore action potentials, okay, sent through, so it's called the neurohypophysis. Okay, so we'll talk about that. All right. All right. So it secretes all these hormones that are involved in metabolism, growth, maturation, and all that, reproduction, luteinizing hormone, and things like that. And follicle-stimulating hormones, which are called gonadotropins. So the hypothalamus releases gonadotropin releasing hormones, and then the anterior pituitary will produce luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone that are involved in reproduction. So there's a lot of functions for that pituitary, right? So the hypothalamus regulates the pituitary in 2 ways. Okay, the anterior pituitary is controlled by hypothalamic hormones. That's why it's called the adenohypophysis. And then the posterior pituitary, the one towards the back, is controlled by action potential. So it's called the neurohypophysis. Okay? So that's that. All right, so we're in the brain over there. And where does the pituitary sit? We talked about it. Where does the pituitary sit on the skeleton? Where does it sit on the floor of the cranium? Where does it sit? Where does it sit? In the stellar testicle, remember? The one you did in the bone exam. Okay, so that's where it sits right there. You see, this is the stellar testicle right here, like that. That C-shaped region that we did in the, So it's over there. And then the hypothalamus conveniently right on top of it. And then the thalamus is right here. Okay? It keeps going up. All right, so there you go. And each time we'll talk about the gland, we'll show it in relation to the whole body, and then we'll show exactly where it's located. And so, like I was saying, this is the infundibulum, the stalk that connects the hypothalamus to the posterior pituitary. All right, and there's your stellar testicle over there. So I like you to look at these pictures you know, because these are pictures of actual carnivores, you know, brain dissections of humans, which we don't get a chance to see in the lab because we've got a cat in there. So that's why I put them in there so you can see that. All right, so the pituitary gland, like I said, the one at the back, the posterior pituitary, is called the neurohypophysis. Why? Because it's controlled by action potential from the nervous system. Okay? In fact, this is a very good example of how the nervous system interacts with the endocrine system. You see what I'm saying? Endocrine system being the second most important control system in the body, right? Like we talked about. You see how this is the posterior pituitary, this is towards the back. So that's why it's called posterior. And you can see this infundibulum. So you've got, actually what happens is that you've got neuron, you see there's a neuron here, then there's many of them, okay? And the neuron cell body is located in the hypothalamus, okay, for the posterior, for the one that controls the posterior pituitary. So actually the hormones are produced in the hypothalamus, okay? And then they go down these tracts, which are these axons, and then in very, very tiny vesicles, okay, very tiny vesicles. And then you know how this splits like that into the synaptic knobs, into synaptic terminals, like we did, remember we did that. So inside of it will be what? Vesicles, carrying that hormone now. But the hormone was actually produced up here. Do you see what I'm saying? The hormone is actually produced in the hypothalamus because the cell body of those axons, of those neurons that control the pituitary, you know, produce that hormone in there, actually in the hypothalamus, okay? But then it will come and sit in these synaptic terminals in vesicles, now larger vesicles, just like the acetyl in vesicles. So that when the hypothalamus sends an action potential on this, then those vesicles will cause exocytosis, and then you know the hormone comes out. Okay. But the fact that it's controlled by the release of the hormone is controlled by an action potential. That's why it's called the neurohypophysis. Okay, on the posterior pituitary. Okay.
It doesn't produce any hormones on its own.
It produces some, you know, but
They all come from.
yeah, most of them come from the neurons in the hypothalamus, and then they wait in the synaptic terminals, where when the action potential comes down, then exocytosis causes the release of those hormones from the pituitary. Okay. What that? You get a question, Florence? Are you sure? Because if you ask it, then I will say it, and then everybody gets it. You know what I'm saying? We all share. You good? Okay. All right. So the anterior pituitary is towards the front. You see how it's not kind of connected? You see where it ends? It ends there. So there's going to be a system of blood vessels, okay, called the hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system. Okay, portal system. Portal just means a carrier. You know, it carries, blood to another organ. Okay, so blood is going to be carried, because hormones travel in blood, right? So the hormones produced in the hypothalamus will go through blood vessels to control to cause the anterior pituitary to release hormone. Okay. Say for instance, gonadotropin releasing hormone it will be secreted by the hypothalamus, and then it will go through blood vessels. So this will be blood vessels. Okay. And then the hormone will take effect here and cause gonadotropin releasing hormone causes the release of gonadotropins like LH and FSH. Okay. So the anterior pituitary is called the adenohypophysis because it's controlled by the hormones that travel through blood. Okay? The posterior pituitary is controlled by action potentials that travel on the axons. Yes. Okay, Spring?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll keep repeating it and it will make sense because I want you to know about how the pituitary is controlled, okay, by the hypothalamus. The posterior pituitary and the anterior pituitary. So the posterior pituitary, you can see over here, is connected by the infundibulum. The anterior pituitary is not. So therefore, blood vessels that start in the hypothalamus and end in the pituitary will carry the hormones. Okay? All right. So there you go. And you can look at these pictures there. So hypothalamus, that means under the hypothalamus, right? Hypophyseal, you know, talking about the pituitary.
No word should have that many letters. That looks like 3 words.
That's why I'm breaking
It's
it
like
down for
17
you.
letters.
I'm kind of breaking it down for you. Hypothalamus just means under the hypothalamus, okay? Hypophyseal, it talks about the pituitary. Because the pituitary, what's the other name for the pituitary? Hypophysis. Okay? So that's why they were just lazy to make 2 words, you know what I'm saying? So they made 1. Under hypothalamus. Okay? That's the first part of the word. So don't be tricked by, you know, the length of the word. You break it down. Okay? Make it easy, manageable chunks. That's what you do. You gotta do that. Because otherwise you go nuts. The pituitary equals pituitary. Hypothalamus pituitary doesn't sound good. So you say hypothalamus hypophyseal. Oh, that sounds really nice, doesn't it? So they use that word. So this just means pituitary. So don't let it trick you guys. That's all it is. You split it into those 2 words. So the portal system, it talks about the blood vessels. So it's controlling the anterior pituitary. Right? You see that? Yes. Portal just means blood vessel. Okay. So don't let some of these words trick you into thinking, oh my God, it's all complicated. It's not. So hypothalamus hypophyseal portal system, it's just a portal system of blood vessels that connect the hypothalamus to the hypophysis, which is the pituitary. That's all. Okay? So the hormones will travel through there. Okay? Because usually I ask about how how does the hypothalamus control the anterior pituitary? How does the hypothalamus control the posterior pituitary? I do that all the time. Okay? So hormones are produced in hypothalamic neurons, and then they are released, and then they go through the blood, and then they will go and stimulate the pituitary, anterior pituitary, to release. Okay? So, okay, here goes that word again. Hypothalamus hypophyseal tract. Remember we said neuron axons in the brain, in the central nervous system are called tracts. Okay? And neuron axons outside, we did that just not so long ago. Outside of the central nervous system are called nerves. That's all. So this is a tract of neurons. Remember the neurons with their cell body in the hypothalamus, they have an axon that terminates in the pituitary, posterior pituitary. That's all. So hypothalamus, hypophyseal, you break it down again. Hypophysis is the pituitary. Okay, tract is those axons that are connecting the 2. That's it. Okay, so hormones are produced in the hypothalamic neurons, and then, you know, because the cell body is located in the hypothalamus. And then via small vesicles, those hormones will trickle down through the axon, okay? And then will be stationed in bigger vesicles, you know, those terminal vesicles, right? Or synaptic vesicles, like we did before. And they'll be carrying that hormone. So that when the action potential comes from the hypothalamus going through those tracts, it will cause release, exocytosis of those vesicles, carrying the hormone, and then it's released. Then it does its thing. Okay? So don't let it fool you, okay? It's simply that the anterior pituitary is controlled by actual hormones, and we know how hormones travel in the blood. So there's going to be blood vessels that connect the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary. Okay? And in the case of the posterior pituitary, because it's physically connected by a stalk, called the infundibulum to the hypothalamus. Therefore, you just have neuron tracts coming from the hypothalamus going to the posterior pituitary. So that it sends an action potential, and then those hormones in those synaptic terminals, in the synaptic vesicles, will be released. That's it. Okay? So those are the two ways. I know you can have problems with that in the module as well, this control of the pituitary. And then you had some problems with the cortical hormones, which we'll be talking about in a little bit as well. Right? So, the hormones here will be controlling only the anterior pituitary because it's the hormones that control the anterior pituitary, and it's the action potentials that control the posterior, okay? All right, so like I was talking about, growth hormone releasing hormone from the hypothalamus will cause the pituitary to release growth hormone, okay? Then there's somatostatin, which is growth hormone inhibiting hormone. When you're done growing, it will cause, to stop growth. If you have gigantism, it will be a problem with that system where you don't secrete somatostatin to stop you from growing, so you become 8 foot or something. Okay. What's that? If you send a message to them, did you what she said? Remember, bone grows and the diffuser plate, that's how you get bigger and longer. Okay? So, if there's not that stop message from somatostatin, you keep growing. And it's bad too. If you grow too tall, it's not good for you. Most of those guys can't stand. You know what I'm saying? They lose their balance. You see some of the tallest guys in the world, they're always on props. Have you seen it? Yeah, you see the world's tallest man or whatever. They can't really stand. It's too tall, man. Too much structure there. Thyroid releasing hormone, thyroid tropic. Shaq just got lucky. He stopped at 7 foot something. You know what I'm saying? 7. Yeah, he's too tall. That's why I always use him as an example, and people are like, oh, Shaq. Okay. So all those hormones, all these responses. Most of the hormones, the name of it will tell you what the hormone does. So I won't go into that, but just realize that it's the anterior pituitary that's controlled by hormones. Okay. Okay. It doesn't mean that the posterior doesn't have its hormones too. It has its hormones too. The posterior pituitary will release antidiuretic hormone, the one that goes and works on the kidneys to preserve water. Okay, so if you haven't taken water and you're thirsty, the body will release less water in urine. Okay, so it will release antidiuretic hormone from the posterior pituitary. And another one is oxytocin, which is involved in uterine contraction. Okay, it's also found in males, but they kind of don't know what the function of it is. But I bet it's the function of contracting smooth muscles, such as maybe the release of sperm, because you got to control this epididymis and whatnot, and the vas deferens. So maybe that's what it works there for. Okay, but they're not pretty sure of it. Okay, so posterior, and then of course the anterior pituitary will know about all these hormones. So all these hormones are proteins and so forth. Okay.
Posterior always has those two, the ADH and oxytocin.
Yeah, it's got those two. Those are the two major ones, really. So it doesn't have many. Okay. And it's also oxytocin for milk production. Okay. And then these are the ones. I just wanted to show you. These are the two. So I think it was in your module 2 where it talks about some posterior hormones and the anterior hormones. So the posterior has only got these two. Okay. Antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin, but most of them, because the anterior pituitary is controlled by hormones from the hypothalamus, then it secretes more hormones. Okay. So these are probably the 9 hormones. The 2 here from the back and the 7 from the front makes those 9 hormones I talked about at the beginning of the lecture, right? That are produced by the pituitary as a gland. Okay. There you go. So now we go to the thyroid. So the thyroid really works with metabolism, mobilizing glucose and so forth. Okay. So if you've got hyperactive thyroid, you've got so much metabolism is so high, you're cracking and burning fat, and you're probably restless as well. So this thyroid has got kind of 2 lobes, and then kind of like another pyramid or lobe there, and kind of like a connector in the middle called the isthmus. Okay. Just the thyroid is kind of here, like on the neck. It kind of wraps around the trachea. Okay? It's like a C-shaped organ that doesn't go all the way back. and touch. Okay, so there's the thyroid gland. We talked a little bit about the thyroid gland when we did this little system, right, didn't we? Yeah, we did. What did we say the thyroid gland does? What hormone does it secrete? Starts with a C, right? Yeah, calcitonin in them, right? Yeah, so.
The largest?
Yeah. Largest endocrine. Well, the pancreas is big, but it has also got an exocrine function to it. It's not all endocrine. That's what I'm saying. It's not all endocrine. And things like the kidney that produce, the kidney's really got other functions, but it's got certain cells that will produce hormones like erythropoietin, you know what I mean? So it's not like really, it's really a urinary system gland that happens to produce hormones. Okay, and the intestines, small intestine produces cholecystokinin, secretin, but it's really a digestive organ that happens to produce, because it's got a few cells that will produce. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is the largest endocrine gland. It's a whole gland that just does that. Okay, it's strictly an endocrine gland. There's no other function but to do that. Okay, so it's located in the front of the neck. Kind of wraps a little bit to the back. It doesn't touch right at the back there. And then in the back, that's where you find the parathyroid, which we'll talk about after this in a little bit. So like I said, it's got the two lateral lobes on the side, kind of like so, you know what I'm saying? And then it's got the pyramidal one, and then another lateral lobe. And then this is what is called the isthmus. Okay? Sometimes I ask about characteristics of these glands, I do that. Okay? We talk about functions. This is the lateral lobe, and this is the pyramidal lobe. Okay? So it's got in it follicles that contain the thyroglobulin. Okay, which is a protein that holds some of these hormones in it. Okay? And then it's got also parafollicular cells that produce our hormone that we've seen before. Okay? Called calcitonin. Alright? The follicle cells produces that T3, T4, those thyroid hormones. So those are really true thyroid hormones, really, because it's produced by the follicles. Okay, the calcitonin is a hormone, yes, but it's produced by parafollicular cells, which are sort of cells sprinkled inside of the thyroid. Okay, the triiodothyronine and tetraiodothyronine, because it's got 4 iodine molecules, and then it's got. So this is simply the sort of the inactive hormone, the T4, and there's more of this, and we'll talk about that. About 80 or so % is T4, and it's like the inactive hormone, and then T3 is the active one, triiodothyronine. Okay, so before it acts, it's converted to T3. So it's about 10% T3, and then the 90% is the inactive part. Okay, because you don't want active hormone all over the place. Okay, so that's that. So the endocrine cells, of course, called parafollicular cells are the ones that produce the calcitonin. But the major deal of it is here, in the follicles. And the thyroglobulin is a protein that kind of sort of hangs out with those T3, T4. Why? Because T3, T4 are lipid soluble. So when they travel in blood, they are also attached to a protein. Okay? All right, so very good. So it produces lipid hormones. Lipid soluble hormones. Whenever something is lipid in the blood, in the aqueous environment, anywhere where there's water, it has to be attached to a protein. Otherwise, no go. Okay? It's not mixing with water at all because it's lipid. Okay, so there's the thyroid again with the lateral lobe, the pyramidal lobe, which looks like a pyramid, and then the isthmus, which is connected, and then the lobe. So you can just talk about it. So see what I was saying? These are the follicles. See these little cups like this, which is the major component of the thyroid gland. In it contains the thyroglobulin proteins, and it is mixed with those T3 and T4, right? Because those are lipid soluble, so they need to be associated with the protein all the time. Any lipid in an aqueous environment must be attached to a protein, always. Okay? And then the parafollicular cells are the ones that produce calcitonin, the ones that will cause bones to take up calcium and store it. Right? Remember from the bones? Yeah. So, thyroid hormones proper, these are the ones that are produced by the follicles, called T3 and T4. T3 is triiodothyronine. It just has 3 iodine molecules, that's all. And it's the active one. So it's about 10% of the hormone, right? And then tetraiodothyronine has got 4 iodine molecules. That's why if you have a shortage of iodine, like in some parts of Africa, and some other parts of the world where iodine is less, the thyroid gland will start to get goiter. Why? Because the thyroid is like, my God, we need some iodine because these hormones need to protect. So it grows. It's got no other response. It starts to grow and grow and grow. Just because it doesn't have the iodine. So you need iodine. So take iodized salt. Okay? The table salt, they put iodine in it. So, but here that hormone is, a metal is all over the place. So people don't have that condition here because it's always there. So simple fact of taking iodized salt will prevent that goiter. So goiter is what is related. Okay, I just put it there because so that you know now. Now you know it's because of the lack of iodine. Simply because these hormones have got iodine on them. Triiodothyronine, which is the active one. So there's only 10% of it. And then the tetraiodothyronine, which is 90%, has got 4 iodine molecules on it, and is the inactive one. So whenever it acts, it will be converted to T3 first, before it does its thing. Okay? So it makes sense, right? Having more of the inactive one, so that when you need it, you just convert it to the active type, and then that's it. Okay? So these are the true thyroid hormones, okay? Even though cholesterol is part of it, but we really recognize T3 and T4 as the real thyroid hormones. Okay? And they're involved in metabolism, and so forth. Effects of thyroid hormones. So now we need to know that. T3 and T4, increased rate of glucose use, glucose metabolism. So fat is mobilized, protein is mobilized. It's all geared to turning it, because fat and protein can be turned into energy, into glucose. Especially that the brain will only use glucose and it will not use anything else. Okay? So the body's survival instinct is to always turn these other organic compounds to glucose. It's like a survival thing because the brain will only use, and your brain is the most important thing, it's the control center for everything. If your brain has got no glucose, then you got problems. Right? And it increases body temperature too. So it really, it causes your metabolism. So if you've got a hypoactive thyroid, then you can gain weight because it's not mobilizing all your nutrients. Okay. And if you have a hyperactive thyroid, on the other hand, you're checked up like this because it's like, you know what I'm saying? It's like really getting you worked up. Okay? Because it's really mobilizing all this energy. You're kind of restless. So, T3 and T4, they maintain blood pressure. Because having the proper blood pressure is important to do what? For blood to move. If your blood pressure is too low, then you're not going to send enough oxygen, enough nutrients to the body parts, because they have to go all the way down to the big toe. Okay? So, it's got to maintain good blood pressure for that. So that all these nutrients that is being mobilized can go to where they need to go. Okay? So if I ask about the effects of these T4, T3, talk about that, right? Mobilization of glucose, it's basic stuff, and mobilization of fat, protein. Increase in body temperature, okay? Regulating, when your body temperature is kind of high, it will speed up reactions a little bit, you know what I'm saying? They go faster. Whenever they do open heart surgery, to reduce your metabolism, what do? Decrease your temperature. They put you on ice, literally. Okay? So that you won't need that much oxygen while you are. In fact, some guy, they were in the Arctic regions and so forth. You know how it's all ice and water is flowing through. He bumped his head, almost dead. and then he fell into the cold water. And they found him alive, actually. His metabolism was so low that he didn't need to breathe that much.
That way when you get a high fever, your respiratory increases if you start breathing.
You start breathing fast, and your heart rate goes up too. So it will be trying to pump it up because the blood carries the heat, carries everything. The blood carries everything in the body. Nutrients, oxygen, gases, heat, everything is carried by the blood. Okay? So so it regulates tissue growth. Okay? Regulates tissue growth because it mobilizes all these nutrients, makes sure there's enough blood pressure to take all these nutrients around. Right? So development of the skeletal nervous system, all this growing and so in kids who are really growing, they need to have a well-functioning thyroid so that because it's controlling all these things and they are still really growing, you need to be able to mobilize all the nutrients, make sure the nutrients are being distributed throughout nicely, correct blood pressure, and then maturation of reproductive parts. Okay, so you won't be able to mature properly if your thyroid is not working properly. If you're young, you may become impotent or something. So it's very important. Maturation and reproductive capabilities controlled by that. So gotta know this, okay?
Thyroxine is a water-insoluble hormone that is brought to the target cell via a protein carrier. Because it is lipophilic, thyroxine can easily pass through the cell membrane. Thyroxine contains 4 iodines and is often abbreviated T4, tetraiodothyronine. The thyroid gland also secretes smaller amounts of a similar molecule that has only 3 iodines, called triiodothyronine, T3. Both hormones enter target cells, but all the T4 that enters is converted into T3. Thus, only the T3 form of the hormone enters the nucleus and binds to nuclear receptor proteins. The hormone receptor protein complex, in turn, binds to the appropriate hormone response elements on DNA. The binding of the hormone receptor complex has a direct effect on the level of transcription at the site where it binds. The messenger RNA, mRNA, produced then codes for specific proteins.
Okay. So in the exam, if I wanted for you to describe a lipid-soluble hormone that attaches to a nuclear receptor, say, go to T4, T3. You know what I'm saying? Or
T4 loses.
The iodine,
Uh-huh.
one iodine one, so gets into cytoplasm. Yeah. Because T4 is the inactive one. Okay, so the gland, the thyroid produces a lot more T4. Okay, because it can easily be converted to T3 by knocking off one iodine. Okay.
Do we use T3 and T4 in the exam, or do we have to try it out?
Triiodothyronine once. Write it once, just for the sake of the experience. Then you can say T3, T4 later on. Okay? Once you describe for me the word, you are free to, abbreviate the heck out of it later. I don't care. But you just have to at least describe it once, because you need to know how the T4 is spelled. So if I say, can you give me the mechanism of action of the thyroid hormones T3, T4, triiodothyronine, tetraiodothyronine, or I can say thyroxine. Thyroxine is T4. Is tetraiodothyronine. Okay, thyroxine is a shorter name, so we could use that. Okay, and then you would have to do a nuclear receptor, okay, to get it all completely correct. Okay.
You have to say it, write it out once, and then we can abbreviate.
Yeah, write it out once. Anytime you abbreviate anything in the exam, you have to show me that you know the full term. Once you show me that, I don't care. Abbreviation letter is okay. But none of these kind of abbreviations, okay? Please do not do this. This one really irritates me. Like with, people do this. No, please write with. It's only for thinking. I have to go there. I'm sorry. So calcitonin is also secreted by the thyroid hormone. The parafollicular cells do that. All right. And we know about calcitonin, right? It's nothing new. We did it in the bones. Okay. So here you can Google this information out. If I ask about this stuff we've done before, you know it already. Okay, so when blood calcium goes up, okay, then you secrete calcitonin, and then it will take calcitonin and deposit into bone. Okay, we'll be talking about the opposite of this in a short while. Okay, blood calcium levels rise, calcitonin levels rise. blood calcium levels, and it was in your module too. When it was talking about PTH and calcitonin, it was tricking you with all sorts of nice questions. That's why I like those modules. Because it will make you to think. It will cause you to think. When you think about the information, it sticks more in your head than when you just read it. When you just read it, nothing happens really most of the time. So you can spend hours and hours doing it. But if you're doing an exercise, because you're using your brain, you're thinking about it, you're struggling with it, I like you to struggle in those modules. Because when you do that, that's how you get to know the information. That's the only way you know it, actually. Okay? So that's that. Okay, so, and it will do that. So calcitonin, targets the skeleton, so that, and because we know about the bone cells, don't we? We know about the osteocytes, we know about the osteoclasts. We've already done that. So that's why I did it before. So you know that if osteoclasts are active, then it's going to be busy breaking down calcium from bone. So calcitonin will cause the inhibition of those. Okay? It will probably stimulate osteocytes, which will make sure that bone is deposited. Calcium is deposited into bone. Okay? So we know about that. So, stimulate uptake of calcium, you need osteocytes, and you don't need these guys. Okay? You already know this. It's nothing new. So some of these lectures are free. Okay, so I told you that the thyroid kind of wraps around the trachea, but it doesn't touch at the back there. It just goes like a C-shaped ring, okay? And then on the back of it, if you look from the back, you see 4 dots called parathyroid gland. That's one that produces parathyroid hormone, PTH, which was all over your module too.
Has there ever been a case in a person where it wraps completely around?
I don't think so. Unless, it may be, if there's a genetic mutation. You know how it is, the body does things for good reason too. It's kind of wrapped around the trachea. So if it touches, you could have problems. If it starts to hypertrophy, you could strain yourself. The only part where God kind of sift us is the prostate. Because the prostate gland wraps around the urethra. That's why when they grow up, like some of us are growing up, like we're getting old, the prostate will always start to hypertrophy. And then when it hypertrophies, it will start to creep on the urethra. So you have to go many times. When you go, you don't need to release. Okay, so the fact that it doesn't wrap around prevents that. Because you could die by choke. If for some reason some cancer happens in the thyroid and it starts to hypertrophy, such as with gout, those guys would die immediately, because then, you know what I'm saying, with goiter. So that's why it doesn't touch. So if it touches, you might have problems. You might strangle yourself. It's just like hanging yourself. You know what I'm saying? So that body does those things. If it wasn't for the location of the prostate gland, we'd be fine. We wouldn't be getting any problems. I mention it because, it's another organ that wraps around another. Okay, so parathyroid hormone, parathyroid gland. So these are the tiny, and they're at the back. You see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, in the posterior aspect of the thyroid. Okay, and there is parathyroid hormone. How easy can that be? And we know about PTH too. And we know about the 3 effects of PTH, right? Already, you do. Remember what are the PTH effects? Because the PTH will break down bone, calcium from bone, right? When blood calcium levels go low, then you release this one. Okay, and then you stimulate osteoclasts. That's the primary effect of PTH. But it doesn't just do that. It will cause production of active vitamin D in the kidneys. It will cause absorption of calcium in the small intestine. Because you don't only just want to break down the bone, otherwise your bones become brittle. You know what I'm saying? So PTH doesn't just break down bone to get the calcium. It will look elsewhere to spare your bone so that your bone is strong. Okay? And then again, it will cause the kidneys not to release too much calcium in urine. So you retain more. So those 3 things. Okay? Because I will sometimes ask about the effects of parathyroid hormone. And you talk about those 3, and that will be another freebie too, because I did ask about it in the last exam, did I not? It was there. Because I knew it would be coming again, so you gotta know those things. Okay, so once you know these things, you know them, okay? You can't take it out of you. So you know it, that's it. Okay, so PTH, it does that. It promotes a reabsorption of calcium in the kidney, and then it will cause also the kidney to produce active vitamin D. And vitamin D causes the small intestine to absorb more calcium. Okay? This is in order that you don't just get your calcium from breaking down your bone. Otherwise, it's going to become, weak. Your skeleton will just be going like that and boom, you fall down. Because, so it's got to find calcium elsewhere in the body. That's why you have those three effects of parathyroid hormone, right? Makes sense, right? Because you wouldn't want to just go to the bone and so forth and so forth. So sometimes in the exam, if you want to be fancy, I'll say, okay, if calcium levels go low, tell me the hormone that is produced and what effects it will have. If calcium levels go up, tell me the hormone that is produced and the effects of that hormone. Okay. So if calcium levels go up in the blood, then you release calcitonin, right? And then it will activate osteoclasts to take up calcium in the bone. If you have low blood calcium, you drink your milk, okay, then you release parathyroid hormone, and then it will do those three things: break down calcium from bone, activate osteoclasts, then cause reabsorption of calcium in the kidneys. You reabsorb more, so you release less in urine, and then active vitamin D causes more absorption of calcium in the small intestine. Okay. All right. So very good. So know those things. So now this is adrenal. The adrenal next to the kidneys. You see the right on top of the kidneys. So there's the adrenal glands, and the adrenal glands have the cortex, and see that's a real cadaver right there. That's why I like you to look at those pictures. And then it will shows you where the gland is located. Okay. And the adrenal gland has got the cortex on the outside, which produces cortical hormones, and then it's got the medulla in the middle that produces epinephrine and norepinephrine, okay, for fight or flight situations.
If they remove a kidney, do they leave the adrenal gland or do they take it?
No, they leave it. I don't know. It depends on, because really the adrenal gland is not part of the kidney, you see what I'm saying? It just happens to be a gland that's on top of the kidneys. So they'll just, that's a good question. I'm not so sure. Because when somebody donates, I think they just take the kidneys and they leave that well alone. Because it's really got nothing to do with, the kidneys. They're just next to each other, very close.
Unless there would be like a cancer or something.
Yeah, unless if the cancer is affecting everything. So the nearest organ is going to be, when it metastasizes, when you move to another organ, it will likely go to the adrenal. Okay? So that situation. So when they're just having kidney problems, to make the surgery less complex, because then you don't touch with the blood vessels. No. So they only do the kidneys for that reason, to make it simple.
Very simple.
But it's really, actually they used to do kidney through the vagina for females. That's something, it's an interesting thing. They could do that. They could go through transvaginal, and then they get the kidney, they pull it out, and then they so they could remove it through there. They do that. Yeah, it happens. You can
Google it.
Google it.
Mine that way, but yeah, really.
Yeah, they do that. So these are paired, of course, on top of the kidneys. Okay, divided into two parts. Like I said, the adrenal medulla is the inside layer, and that one produces epinephrine and norepinephrine, sometimes called adrenaline and noradrenaline because of the adrenal glands. And then, of course, the adrenal cortex, which is on the outside, it produces a whole bunch of these, glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, and so forth. And it's got this zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, zona reticularis. So this kind of produces gonadocorticoids, and this produces the glucocorticoids here, glucocorticoids, and mineralocorticoids, the zona glomerulosa. Okay. So mineralocorticoids will deal with minerals, glucocorticoids will deal with glucose, right? Like cortisol. And then corticoids will be dealing with hormones, because you can produce some precursors for for testosterone and estrogen in there. Okay, that can be converted to testosterone or estrogen. All right. Okay, so structurally, really, functionally, it's 4 glands in one. Those 3 layers in the adrenal medulla. See what I'm saying? That's the adrenal gland. See what I'm saying? These 3 plus the adrenal medulla. And they produce very different hormones that have very different effects. Okay? So there it is, the medulla in the middle, the cortex out there. The cortex has those 3 layers. Okay? Okay, so approximately 80% of the hormones released for obvious reasons, fight, flight situations, epinephrine, no epinephrine, right? So epinephrine and then no epinephrine, but 20% in the adrenal medulla, all right? Epinephrine, adrenaline causes all these things. Increases blood glucose when you gotta run away from a lion or something. It increases more blood to the muscles. It does all those things. Increases your heart rate so that you pump more of these nutrients when you're running away from something. Just like when you're jogging on the treadmill, right? Your heart rate is going up. Okay, you need more oxygen. Your respiratory rate is going up, so you suck in more air, right? So it does that. So vasoconstriction in organs that are not really necessary at that time, like in the skin, so that no blood really goes to the muscles. It doesn't go to the skin. It doesn't go to the digestive. This was in your module too. It was asking about the action of the epinephrine and what are and then it will give you a whole list of stuff. Okay, so that's what it does. When you imagine yourself, you're running from a lion, okay, or from a whatever, something you're afraid of. You know what you need to do. Your heart rate is going to go up. You're going to need more glucose to go to your muscles, more oxygen, you're going to breathe heavier, all those things. Just think about it and then write it down. It's not going to be that hard if you think of it like that, in a practical kind of way. That's what physiology is, really. Okay? So it will stop blood to go away. You don't need it. Like the skin. You don't need to have blood in there. Most of the skin is dead anyway, the epidermis. So you take blood where you need it the most. Goes to your muscles. Okay? Your heart beats fast. You turn all the glycogen into glucose. Right? And then you use it up. And then it causes vasodilation in skeletal muscles where you need it. Right? Vasoconstriction where you don't really need it, like digestive organs, for instance. Even if you just eat a burger, you stop the digestive activities and you send the blood to your leg muscles. Okay? And then, of course, the sympathetic division, of course, because the sympathetic division usually is one that activates, and so forth. So emotions, injury, and stress. Like the stress of seeing a lion there, you gotta get out of there. So that's what it does. And then, of course, when you're exercising, same thing does. You release your epinephrine so that you get your heart rate going up, you get everything going up, and so forth. Blood glucose, whatnot. All right. So the adrenal cortex, that's the one that synthesizes all those glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids. So they're called corticosteroids from cortex. Okay? Corticosteroids from the cortex. Okay? So zona glomerulosa. Okay? Refrain from being tricked into thinking the zona glomerulosa produces glucocorticoids. No. You know what I'm saying? Because it sounds like glucocorticoids, but it's kind of, that's the other way around. In fact, the glomerulus produces mineralocorticoids. And mineralocorticoids like aldosterone deal with minerals, like sodium. Sodium retention. You see what I'm saying? So the name usually tells you what that hormone is doing. And then glucocorticoids, if you don't know what that is, come on. So it's glucose. So, and that hormone is cortisol. Okay. Cortisol, I said last time, is also like a stress hormone. I don't know if I was talking to this class or the other class, okay? But anyway, cortisol, because it mobilizes glucose, when the body is stressed, it will release nutrients, right, to kind of sort of deal with stress so that you can have energy, you can do stuff. So if you're constantly stressed, you start to over-secrete cortisol, okay? to mobilize more and more. Maybe it could be anything. Maybe the stress is that you're having less blood or whatever, your blood pressure is low, or any kind of stressing, something that stresses the body, or it could be work, it could be anything. So your body releases cortisol so that you mobilize glucose, right, to kind of deal with it, That's the reaction of the body. You say, okay, maybe we need more nutrients to take care of the problem. Okay, so cortisol, if it's secreted too much, it also starts to depress the immune system. That's why if you're stressed, what do you tend to get? The flu, right? See what I'm saying? Because when you're stressed, your body will release cortisol. But cortisol doesn't just mobilize glucose, it depresses the immune system. So when you're stressed, that's when you tend to come down with the cold. Have you noticed that? And they say go work out. If you go work out, you don't think of your problems, and you become a little happy, you know what I'm saying? And then you release stress. That's why working out releases stress. I work out a lot actually, because I'm stressed. Okay, anyway, so the fasciculata releases glucocorticoids that mobilize glucose and there's cortisol. So it's geared to respond to stress. Any stressful situation, you release cortisol so that you have glucose to make you feel better. Okay? So zona reticularis deals with gonadocorticoids. These are the corticosteroids that can form the testosterone and estrogen for gonads. For gonado is to do with reproduction. So it forms androgens. Actually, androgen is the basis for testosterone. Also, estrogen starts with androgens. So these can be converted to estrogen and testosterone androgens. Okay. So know those three layers and know what it produces. So now we go to the pancreas. The pancreas is another gland that has an exocrine function, which produces the enzymes, the acina part, and then it's got the endocrine function that produces the insulin from the beta cells, islets of Langerhans, and then glucagon from the alpha cells. Okay? So this is the part we're interested in for that. The acina cells produce the enzymes from the pancreas to do the digestive work. But the pancreatic islets, or called islets of Langerhans, are the ones that produce insulin, beta cells, glucose, glucagon, alpha cells. Okay? So that's that. Alright? So just know which one produces what. This one breaks down glycogen to form glucose. This one causes cells to uptake glucose after you've eaten a meal. So if you're diabetic, you're not producing enough insulin, so that when you eat your meal, your glucose stays in your blood. And glucose starts to disturb and reacts with other things. You get problems. Okay, so you need insulin from the beta cells of the islets of Langerhans for the cells to take up glucose. So it's just got the head, which is wrapped around the duodenum, the tail, and the body and the tail. It's kind of long, it kind of sort of stretches like that, across like that. Okay? But anyway, that's the structure of it. Then the pineal body is in the brain. It produces melatonin. Melatonin really doesn't have many big functions, but one of the things that's involved in sleep-wake cycles, like, the time you sleep and wake up. So the big thing about the pineal gland is melatonin, okay? Produces melatonin, okay? And it's really involved in the sleep-wake cycles. And sort of can inhibit reproductive function, okay? Reproductive maturation. But the big thing about it is melatonin is related. I think some of it was in this module a little bit. It just really regulates sleep-wake cycles. So that's the big message I want you to know about the body. Otherwise, most of the functions of it is not really well known. They don't really have like a big function other than melatonin affects your sleep-wake cycles. Okay? And there it is. It's a small little dot over there. This is the thalamus, and this is the the hypothalamus, and then the pituitary down there. Okay, and then the infundibulum. Okay, so it's right in that location right there. Okay, and then the thymus. The thymus is involved in the immune system. All I want you to know about the thymus is that it produces thymosin and thymopoietin, which causes the maturation of T cells. Okay, T cells are involved in immunity and so forth. Okay, so and just know that the thymus gets smaller as you get older, because it is supposed to produce these. So in a kid who's naive, who isn't exposed to bugs, the thymus is bigger. And then as you grow older, become more exposed to these bugs, and you produce memory cells and so forth, it gets smaller and smaller. When you're 60, it's kind of small and it's getting replaced by fat. But you know that it produces thymopoietins and thymosins that cause the production of the maturation of T cells. From the thymus, that's what they call T cells. Okay? Because they mature in the thymus. Okay, and there it is, right there. Okay? You see it in arterial cadaver. And then you see the baby, how big it is in the baby. It's much bigger. That's an infant right there. And this is an actual human infant. It's probably a fetus. It looks like. Okay, and this is just a list of all the hormones we talked about, right? And where they are produced, right? So you can look at this later on. Some of the other glands we didn't talk about, like the testis and the ovary, that produce testosterone and estrogen and so forth. You can kind of sort of look at that. But today I want you to know about the glands we talked about, right? Okay, and then of course, this is just extra. There are other organs in the body that happen to produce hormones too. Like I was saying, the duodenum, which is part of the small intestine, produces secretin and cholecystokinin, which are involved in digestive activities. And we will really do that when we go to ANP2, when we do the digestive system, okay? But for now, I just want you to know that there are other organs in the body that have other functions, but that have cells that will produce hormones. And then the kidneys, we talked about it, produce erythropoietin for red blood cells, okay? So the production of red blood cells. And then the placenta produces human coronary gonadotrophin in the pregnant female. And then it will also produce progesterone and stuff like that, okay? But the placenta's main function is to take nutrients to the developing fetus, okay? Small intestine digestion. But then there are hormones also. But then we also have, and this was in your little schedule, in your little module, we've got hormone-like substances that are not really produced by specific glands called autocrine, substances that will affect similar cells in the area, in the same area, okay? Then we got paracrine, substances that will affect different cells in the area. They don't go in blood. Those are some of the differences with hormones, okay? And they're not produced by specific endocrine glands, but they are hormone-like substances. Autocrine means same kinds of cells in the area. And then paracrine means different type of cells. And this was in your module, and you kind of had problems with that. So, because paracrine will affect different cells, like growth factors. All your cells grow. So growth factors have to affect different kinds of cells, right? It will suck if you don't affect one kind of cell, and then that stuff to grow bigger and bigger, and every other cell is not. Okay? And then, of course, autocrine will, do like cells, similar cells, but in the area. So they are not secreted by actual hormones. That's why they're glands. That's why they're different from hormones. And they just have local effects. Whereas hormones, because they travel in blood, it's going to be spread out. Okay? So if I ask about differences between autocrine paracrine substances and hormones, we talk about that. And they have some of their functions are not understood, okay? But they do act like hormones. They're not produced by actual glands. But their effects are not widespread. They're local because they don't travel in blood. Okay? So that's the differences between them. And as usual, we compare the systems together and we end. Thank you so much, guys. I took a little bit of time. I will give you a little bit of 5. Okay, I'll give you 5 to start at 5 past. Thank you, I appreciate it.
And we're in the regular lab, right?
Today we are in the lab. We're doing muscles now. We're starting with muscles. It's going to be fun.